Hi, I would like to take a few minutes and talk to you about a subject that we don't like to deal with. Bitterness. Don't let it destroy you. Someone said bitterness is like a poison that you drink trying to kill the other person. But if you drink it, it destroys you. Bitterness is something that God warns us about. There's a lot in the scripture about forgiveness and bitterness. And I'm going to just take one short portion of scripture that is very powerful from the book of Hebrews. And we're going to talk about this. By the way, all of us have dealt with this. Either we've all experienced, shall I say. Whether we deal with it the way God says, that is our choice. But we all have to deal with it. Everybody gets hurt. This is a world of hurt. You will be hurt. Other people will trample on you. They will break your heart. How you deal with it will determine what will happen to you. If you allow it to, and only by your permission, it will destroy you. Well, let's look at it. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 15. It says, looking diligently. Now, diligently means you're passionate about it. You're 100% wholehearted in this thing. Looking diligently about what? Lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, not the other person, but trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Wow, that is powerful. Let's look at this. So God says, look diligently. It reminds me of a verse in Proverbs. Guard your heart. Okay? For out of it are the issues of life. In other words, guard your heart. Set a watch on your heart. Don't let anything get in there. You've got to be the guarder of your heart. Because if you allow things to stay in there, they'll poison you. It says, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God. Now, let me pass and I'll come back to that. It says, lest any root of bitterness springing up. Now, if you've ever planted anything, if you plant something under the ground, it doesn't come up right away. It stays there. The heat of the sun, the water of the rain begin to germinate that thing and it begins to grow, but you can't see it. It's under the surface. Now, if you allow it to stay there, it'll spring up. All of a sudden, one day, you'll look there and it has broken the ground. The same way, if we allow bitterness to stay in our heart, it will simmer and it'll grow. It never stays the same. If you allow it to stay there, it'll grow. And one day, for some reason, it'll spring up. Something will happen to you and and the person will think, what? What has just happened? Well, what has happened? Bitterness has sprung up. And you begin to take it out on other people. That's why it says, lest any root of bitterness, that's what's under the ground, spring up. So the root becomes a shoot and it shoots up. And it says, it troubles you. Wow. You know who's troubled with bitterness? The person who allows it to stay in their heart. They're miserable. It eats at them. It's constantly burning in their heart. Bitterness, what is it? Well, this word, the scripture word there, actually has to do with something that's very caustic and burny or bitter tasting. When I first came to Alabama many years ago, decades ago, someone said to me, hey, have you ever eaten a persimmon? And I thought, what is I didn't know what a persimmon was. I said, no. He said, here, try one. And it was not ripe. It was an unripe one. I popped that thing in my mouth and started chewing on it. My inside of my mouth turned inside out. I mean, I would, it was so bitter. It was, oh, I couldn't help to react about it. And by the way, you let bitterness in your heart, you're going to react. I went to Nicaragua one year on a missions trip. On our day off, we went up to the top of an active volcano. Now, it wasn't spewing out lava. We may be a little bit titched. We're not that titched in the head. And so, but there was no guardrails up there or anything. And it had blown in time past. And around the volcano, you could see all kind of volcanic rock. Now, if you've ever walked on volcanic rock, it's very dangerous. It's very slippery. It just, give in. Well, I wanted to get to be able to see. The only way to get to see down in the volcano was to go on the other side. And you had to walk up toward it. Well, the bad thing about that, it was downwind. And the caustic sulfur, brimstone, that was coming up was blowing toward me. My eyes were burning. I had to put something over my mouth. My lungs were burning because I wanted to see down in there and see the red volcanic looking down there. I mean, I could have fell in because it was real, gravelly there at the top, but I was mad. And I got out of there as quick as I could. That's what bitterness is. Something that burns, something that bites, and it's harsh. Well, when someone does something wrong to us, we can allow ourselves to become bitter. And who does it trouble? Well, they don't deserve forgiveness. They don't, And that person, they're going on with their life. And you could go to Antarctica. You can go to the North Pole. And you're going to take that person with you everywhere you go because of that bitterness. You think about it daily and maybe hourly or maybe by the minute, depending on how bad it was. Now, I don't mean to make light of this, okay, because I've been there. It's been very hurtful to me and to my family. And it'll be hurtful to thee and to your family if you allow it to happen. It troubles you, and listen what the rest of the verse says, and thereby many be defiled. Defiled means it spills over onto them, and they pick up the offense. The people closest to you will be defiled or hurt by it. I'm sorry for the illustration. But if you're around somebody who is very sick and they are projectile vomiting, the chances are it's going to get on you. All right. And if the people that you love the most, if you allow that bitterness to stay, it'll hurt them. Oh, my soul. You're going to allow that to happen? Everything in you. It's like a big rushing river after a big rain. My brother, sister, and I, families, went canoeing one time in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh, after a big rain. Wasn't the best thing. Rafting after a big rain? Whoa, that's great. Canoeing, if you haven't been canoeing, they tip, okay, very easily. So we get in the water. I mean, Pat and I, we tipped over. We were in the same canoe. And she's trying to, and we were only in, maybe chest high water. And she's holding her purse above her head. She didn't want it to get wet. And so she's being swept down the stream. I had to get to her, try to grab the purse and throw it onto shore or whatever so I can help her get out. And it was a big, heavy force that was pulling us downstream. Now, that's what bitterness is like. It's a force. It's an emotion, and you want to hold on to it, and you want to make that person pay, and they did wrong to me. Well, that person is not paying. Who's paying? It's you. Lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, number one, and number two, thereby many be defiled, that's around you, and so it'll trouble you and those around you. And those around you are usually the ones that you love the most. And do you want that to affect them? I know you don't. Okay. This is a great story. There was a young lady named Julie Aftab. She was from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and she was a Christian. And because she would not convert to Islam, they threw acid in her face. This is a young lady, beautiful young lady, teenage girl. They threw acid in her face, burned her all up. Then they held her down and tried to pour it down her throat. And it burned, the inside of her mouth and the throat and whatever. And then they later shot her. This all in one instance. They shot her and they left her for dead. She did not die. This is what she said. Amazing young lady. Quote, I forgave those people, not for them, for me, because you can't serve hatred and love. I'm not going to let it happen to me again. I forgave them to move on because that's what Jesus did for us. That is powerful. She forgave them, not for them, but for her, because she knew what the bitterness was doing to her. What about you? It goes on to say here, verse 16 of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 we did, and now verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator, that's the Greek word porneia, where we get our English word pornography or porn. Okay? Lest there be any fornicator or profane person. Profane means something that is low and lowly, like the threshold on a door. It actually means threshold, part of the word. And where you step on it's down lowly, it's dirty and it's filthy. People step on it with their shoes. And a profane person, as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. You know what unforgiveness, bitterness tends to do? Not only troubles you, not only defiles them around you, but it tends to make you turn profane because you're keeping yourself dirty by allowing that to stay. And then it's sending you down a path of dirtiness. Quick illustration. I was preaching at a youth camp years ago, and I was talking to one of the teenagers. I talked about forgiveness. I was talking about one of the teenagers, to the teenager, and she said, my mother, she was talking about how bitter she was and angry toward her mother of the way she was treating her. And she says, you know what it makes me want to do? It makes me want to go out and just have sex and just to spite her. Like, whoa. You see how that bitterness leads you to make bad choices? I've seen it happen so often. The good choice here, the part I skipped, lest any man, human being, fail of the grace of God. That word fail means fail to obtain. Romans 3:23, this verse uses the same word. It says, all have sinned and come short. You see, you come short of attaining. Okay? And it means to be lacking, lest any man lack the grace of God. Well, you don't have to lack the grace of God. You can turn to the Lord, and with his grace, with everything like the rush of the current pulling you to hold on to it and not let it go, you can, with God's grace, in his strength, he can allow you and give you the strength to forgive. Now, forgiveness is not just like that. If it's just a little nick, it might be like that. But if someone really gouges you bad and hurts you badly, you can begin the process of forgiveness, but it may take a while. You got to work your way through this. This is not a cheap fix. This is a choice of life that you will choose regardless of what people do to you. You'll let it go. You won't hold on to it. You'll get it out of your heart, and you'll choose to allow the Lord to give you the grace to forgive. Wow. Quick illustration here. There was a shooting in an Amish school in Pennsylvania. And it was the school, the community was Nickel Mines, and it was in the Lancaster County. A gunman, Mr. Roberts, took hostages and shot 8 out of 10 young girls ages 6 to 13. And eventually, they tore this old building down. And there's a lot I could say about this story, but I don't have time. But they eventually tore this building down. The West Nickel Mine School was torn down. And a new one-room schoolhouse called the New Hope School was built at another location in its place. You got to tear down the old mine school and build a New Hope School if you're going to have hope for your future. Let God give you the grace. And I've been deeply hurt in time past. I'm talking about one hurt took me about 2 years dealing with it, or a series of hurts from a certain individual. It took about 2 years of dealing with it and fighting. And now, you know what? I want to help this person. I want to minister to them. I want to be a blessing to them. I'd drive across the United States if my driving there to that person would help them. That's how I feel about them now. That's not how I used to feel about them. It's God's grace. And God is able to give you grace. I close with this. Be ye kind, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. So much could be said about that. But choose forgiveness, and you can only forgive with God's grace, and you'll be happy that you did. If you choose bitterness, you will never be happy again the rest of your life. Your choice.